For more than 13 years now, I have gathered with a few other retired United Church of Christ pastors every Wednesday morning, 8 o'clock, at a Bob Evans restaurant on the south side of town, East Street, just south of 465. Anywhere from 3 or 4 of us to 6 or 7 of us. The usual fare is a bowl of oatmeal, sometimes with raisins, or 2 multigrain pancakes, and sometimes somebody splurges with eggs. Obviously, we are not there for the food. We're not there for the ambiance. We are there for each other. We're there for each other. It is not an easy transition from active pastoral ministry, in which you've been doing it for maybe 40 or 50 years, to this new life called retirement. And so when we gather, we tell stories of the way it used to be. Some of them may be true, but they're all told with conviction. We keep up with health news about each other, from cataract surgery to replacements of joints to diagnoses of cancer. We comment a lot on current events, and yes, we do have opinions about current events. And as we leave, we promise to be there next week. There is something about sharing a meal. Sharing a meal, no matter how modest it may be, that binds us together. Some call it table fellowship, breaking bread with one another, even though it may be a pancake instead of bread. It was a little more than a week ago that 61 of us, our folks and community folks, gathered in this very space for a community meal. Third Thursday, we called it. Have been doing it for quite a while now. If you've never been here, it would be a good thing to come. You would see some of us, but you'd see some of the people in the community around us as well. And there's something about eating together that makes it almost sacramental. On Tuesday this week, some of us will be gathering around the round table at the back room of Ciro's for Tuesday morning breakfast, 9 a.m. If you are not working, stop in, gather about the round table, which always has room for more, and we'll talk about life. We'll talk about life. Food hospitality has been and continues to be a primary ingredient for human beings, for community development, for as long as there have been humans. And the resurrection story I read before from Luke's Gospel is another example of the power of shared food and eating together. On the afternoon of that first Easter Sunday, 2 followers of Jesus were walking from Jerusalem to Emmaus, a distance of about 7 miles. One of the 2 people was Cleopas. The other is not named, meaning that likely the second person was a woman, for women are seldom mentioned by name in the Bible. Another example of patriarchal bias of the scriptures. Some have suggested that this is Cleopas and his wife. They are rehearsing with amazement the events of the day. The visit to the tomb by the women, which they find to be empty. The confirmation of the report that it is empty because Peter was there and said it was so. And the challenge of making sense of what that would mean. This stranger on that same road begins to walk with them, and they are talking with themselves about what has happened. And Jesus, the stranger, walks with them. They tell us what had happened in Jerusalem, what happened before that. And this stranger says, that's very interesting. I think it might have something to do with the things that Moses said and the prophets said as they try to explain what has happened. When they arrive in Emmaus, they are invited, Cleopas and the other, invite this stranger to stop and have the evening meal. Might have been going on, but they said, no, stop, stay. Let's eat together. And so somewhere around a common table, in the breaking of common loaf of bread, they recognize that this stranger now is the risen Jesus, the risen Christ. And with that recognition, he is gone. Well, they are amazed, they are astounded, and they hurry back to Jerusalem, back the 7 miles, to report to the disciples what has happened to them. And so in that Easter evening, the stories of various appearances, various ways of saying, he is not dead, he is risen. Well, several theories have been offered as to why they did not recognize this risen Christ when they were walking with him until the broken bread, that is. Emmaus, on a map, is west of Jerusalem, meaning that in the afternoon they were walking into the sun, maybe squinting, maybe not too clear with the setting sun as to the person with them. As I suggested on Easter Sunday, perhaps the risen Christ is not an exact likeness of the Jesus of Nazareth they had known before, that perhaps the risen Christ can look like a common cemetery gardener, as Mary did, or maybe like a fellow traveler on the road, as here in Luke's Gospel, or maybe like anyone, like you, like me. Like the neighbor, depending on how large you want to make the definition of neighbor. Perhaps the risen Christ looks just like the ones he died for and was raised for, to show that all of God's children qualify for inclusion in God's gracious love. We're all in this together. Interesting to me that they didn't recognize this stranger as Jesus, the risen Christ, when he was teaching, when he was rehearsing those biblical stories about the coming Messiah. Luke says he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. That's when they didn't see him. It was in the meal. When he was at table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened and they recognized him in the meal. Although this description of the Emmaus meal sounds so much like the words we continue to use in the celebration of the Lord's Supper, I think we need to broaden our interpretation of what that all means. That yes, our expectations are heightened as we gather about the Lord's table, the table of grace, which we will do next Sunday. Common bread, common juice becoming sacred elements. But the Emmaus meal was just a common evening meal. Yet it is remembered as being as sacred as the upper room and the Last Supper with Jesus and the disciples. When I was growing up, the older you are, you have all these when I was growing up stories. When I was growing up, Sunday noon dinner was the most special meal of the week. It was. Mom would hurry around on Sunday morning. She would put a roast in the oven with potatoes and carrots and celery and whatever else. Put it in the oven, turn it on. Important, turn it on. And then we would leave the house to go to Sunday school and worship. And the smell of that meal would greet us when we walked into the house after church. We often would have guests on Sunday noon dinner. Sunday noon dinner was the time new boyfriends and new girlfriends were subjected to the first round of family critiques. If you were invited to Sunday noon dinner in the dining room with some of the good dishes, you were invited into the very heart of the family. It's what the family really was. Well, that was Sunday noon dinner, and when the dishes were all cleaned up, Mom was finished. The kitchen was closed. Off duty. Sunday night meal, if you could call it that, was on your own. You could have popcorn, you could have leftovers, you could make a sandwich for yourself, but it was really scant fare on Sunday night. When you think about it then, better for the Emmaus meal, these Cleopas, the other person and the stranger, better that would have been a Sunday noon meal with a big family gathering when everybody was in the right place. No, the Emmaus meal was a Sunday evening. Perhaps sandwiches on paper plates or dinner leftovers, informal, not in the dining room, kitchen table. So it was at a kitchen table on a Sunday evening that the risen Christ was known to them, and their eyes were opened, and the risen Christ became real to them. Sunday night. One of the great losses, I think, of many families in these days is the common practice of eating a meal together is on hard times. Norman Rockwell captures that obviously in a lot of his paintings, and my wife tells me that Blue Bloods continues the family meal as well. One of the few on television. We have busy lives, don't we? And the TV station is on to the favorite channel, yes. And so often mealtime is a matter of catching what you can, a bite here, a bite there at the counter, maybe at the island in the kitchen, standing up, something quick, something easy, and off we go again. This church, like most churches, finds many opportunities to eat together, and I would suggest we got to find more. Whole meals, maybe just desserts. Certainly coffee, ice cream this summer. Good for us that we do that with regularity, for we are Emmaus people who need to be together so that in the breaking of the bread we may more fully live our ways more fully into God's ways, for that's what will knit us together. Table hospitality is our way of being together. Old friends, newcomers, strangers, even the estranged, eating together. A few years ago, Pat and I planned an open house for the folks in our neighborhood in that time after Christmas. We sent out invitations to the people around our street, hand-delivered by me, and we had plenty of goodies to go around. We were relatively new to that neighborhood, and it was a new neighborhood, so other people were relatively new to the neighborhood as well. But we had heard that there were a couple of the neighbors who lived across the street from each other who didn't get along too well, who had some old business from where they had lived before and times before they moved into our neighborhood. And as fate would have it, the two showed up about the same time. It was an open house for 3 hours, but they came about the same time. I knew that they were not very fond of each other, and here they were in our home. Well, it took a while as people moved from room to room before they were stuck with each other. And it happened. They talked to each other. As they were eating, of course, they talked about the way it used to be. Eating places that they both knew as they were growing up as teenagers and as young adults. About people they knew mutually, wondering what had happened to them. Changes in the community. Yes, and they even shook hands when they left. Now, some would say it was the magic of Pat's cooking and baking, or maybe it was just the Christmas spirit, or maybe it was just time. It was the right time to move on, to turn over a new leaf, to get on with the challenge of living. Leave the old in the past. Venture into the new. The risen Christ, the reconciling presence of God, is always among us, always wanting to bless us. It may be your family meal, a meal with friends, or one of our church gatherings. But every time we pause to nourish our bodies, to receive energy for the living of another day of life, expect the risen Christ to be present. Expect the risen Christ to be your invited, ever-present guest at the table or at the island or wherever you are. You see, there is no such thing as just a simple meal anymore. It all has potential. Every time we nourish ourselves with another, we are blessing each other, and we are in holy company. And it makes it a sacrament, just breaking bread. Amen.